Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Coolman, and I'm here to do another episode in a draft series called Drafting to Win. And so we've kind of been over a couple of topics already, but I want to just really emphasize the fundamentals. And I actually have a pre-recorded game here for you guys. I don't want to show you everything unless that's in demand. Like if you guys want, I record all my runs so I can watch them later. But I want to make a little bit shorter of content and still really just hit the value so you guys can get the most out of watching these and learn as much as you can with in-game examples that show my mindset as a player while I'm doing it. And I mess up. I'm not perfect by any means, but I know enough about the game. I've been doing it a lot. And the players I play against, they just make decisions that aren't fundamentally correct. And if I could help anyone out there to watch this and do better, that's my goal. So let me show you the deck list real quick. It's red-green for Theros Beyond Death. This set is going to come and go. It's going to go sooner than later, and the next set's going to be here. The same things I'm going to be talking about today are going to be what you want to what you want to utilize when you're drafting and when you're playing in the next set with whatever the cards are in that set. So you'll see what I mean. Okay, so here's my deck list right here. I've got Mystic Repeal as that one that removes the enchantment, and I've got some 2-drops. I've got a bomb 3-drop. Well, not a bomb. It's a really solid card that interacts with having lots of red, so I knew it was going to be red and green. And I think my first pick, pack 1 pick 1, was Mantle of the Wolf, and that's a really good enchantment in this format. But you don't need to know that necessarily, but you'll see it interact with in the game. Here's my curve: 15 creatures, 8 non-creatures. I know just by drafting this deck that my power was really in the 4, 5s, and 6 drops and having trample and barreling through. So that kind of brings up the first lesson, right? So you want to identify what type of deck type you are drafting. So when you're drafting, you guys know this, draft the best cards. But then at the end, and probably midway through the packs, identify if you're an aggro, a mid-range, or a control deck. So this is very simple concepts, but I find that oftentimes in limited, you just naturally go to like a mid-rangey deck where you can sort of go either way. And within mid-range, you can go super aggro, or you can do a control-y style, outvalue them. That tends to be the most success in limited, is outvalue your opponent. So if I play a bigger creature safely and it eats up two of their creatures on the field, that would be an advantage for me. So this deck that I've drafted was a mid-rangey deck, and I could just tell by the onset, just looking at my cards and just getting a feel for it, that I had my goal here was outvalue them. But you'll see in some instances I had to play the aggressive role, and identifying when that's your opportunity, that's when you take it. The best way to do that, to describe that, is experience, or to watch videos like this, specifically during the gameplay, because that's when I can talk you through my mindset, exactly how I'm thinking in the moment. So let's jump into a game and get going. Okay, found a hand that I like with the first 7 cards. Just got two mountains and a playable with Omen of the Forge, which is a 2-drop. This one right here, and then Entrancing Lyre is like removal. It's a 3-drop. This is a 4-drop, and I have to have a creature, but I mean, it's okay. And then 2 more 3-drops. Now these are in green, obviously, but what I'm thinking here is that I have a playable in hand, and then I'm likely to draw at least another land in the next 1 to 3 draws. 1, 2, or 3 draws, I'm most likely to get a land. Now, obviously, I'm hoping that it's a forest, and it ends up being a forest. I end up playing Relentless Pursuit, but if that doesn't happen, I still have Entrancing Lyre. So that's basics of why I decided to keep the hand. Let's see how this game goes. Jump ahead 30 seconds. I end up just playing this. Here, we'll go back a little bit. So play this, pass, wait to play the Omen for as long as possible. Opponent plays a 2-drop. This is a fine target, 1 for 1, and I still have it on the battlefield. Anybody would do this, nothing complicated there. I find the mountain, I still can place my 3-drop. So we're okay right now. but I'm hoping for that mountain or for that forest. You know, I did consider here that I didn't have to play the Entrancing Lyre, because I would get value out of scrying for that forest, and it's not needed. So I practiced a little bit of restraint that I don't need to absolutely. I've got 20 life here to deal with, and my opponent's not going to drop something that I have to deal with right then and there. So that's why I went with the decision to scry as opposed to playing the card. Find the forest, and I don't need that extra land because I have 4 lands here. Or nothing that needs that additional... I don't have any 5-drops. So here, again, playing with my life total, I don't need to drop a creature because he's not presenting anything that's going to barrel me down quickly. So I play the long game, playing for value, drawing that extra forest, and I happen to get another creature, which is the good part about this card, Relentless Pursuit. It also discards 2 cards, fills up the graveyard. Graveyard's good for escape. Ends up working out for me. Next turn, the plan right here is to play Voracious Typhoon, the one that my opponent knows about. I end up pulling the 5-drop, and I'm considering playing that one. But I go with the Typhoon. Probably because my opponent knows about it, and it acts very similar, in this case, to the 5-drop I just... the War Leader. Okay, opponent gives me a removal. Gets him for 2 damage. Not worried about it in that case. Whenever possible, you always want to play on curve. If you're going to play suboptimally, you have to have a reason for doing so. Here, this might have been a mistake because I didn't play, on curve, but I saw that my opponent had full mana up, so possibly they could have had removal. This is what's going through my mind. Again, you don't know in the moment if you're making the right decision or not. Oh, I might have been mistaken. Maybe it was my opponent's turn, but I'm just sort of going through why I did the plays I did. And sometimes I play suboptimally. It's good to rewatch your games and get that, second look at it. I noticed that I could play 2 cards at this point. And I could also remove the threat from my opponent, the 4/3 creature that my opponent presented. Now, here, this is a small thing, but I went with this play by putting the Iroa's Blessing, which gives my creature +1/+1, because I know my opponent has a 1/3 and a 1/1. So I didn't need to put it on the Typhoon here. So that's why I played this creature, then played it for removal. I know these guys they cannot block, so I was safe to attack there. If he attacks with the 1/1s or this creature, I know that I can block it with my 5/2. Here it's starting to look bad because my opponent's gone wide, but I'm not worried at this point. I still have a lot of life to work with, and I've got cards in hand. And I'm sort of reading my opponent and identifying what kind of deck this player is playing, which seems to be pretty low to the ground. It seems like at this point what I was literally thinking is I can outvalue my opponent. Looking at what I have in hand, pretty full graveyard. I've got the Voracious Typhoons come back, and if I escape them for their escape cost. So if I just play the long game, I should be able to have my opponent based on, your opponent seems like they drafted and put low cards in their deck. They're playing Boros, which colors tend to be, smaller red, white creatures, like we're seeing on my opponent's board. So I identify here that I really don't want this voracious typhoon in the middle. Typhon? I don't know how to pronounce it. In the middle. So I know I want to get that enchantment off my creature. And I play with my mana so that I can play the War Leader and sacrifice another creature to get the Typhon in the graveyard. So you sort of see how I'm thinking about outvaluing my opponent in the long game, not trying to do anything cute, and I still have like life total to work with, and I'm trying to, I only have 3 cards in hand to my opponent's 3 cards in hand, but I know that I have stuff in the graveyard that's going to be better, and my opponent is playing black, so that it is a concern of mine that they could have graveyard removal cards, but they haven't presented it yet, so I'm not going to play as if they do. So right there I end up sacking the creature so that my opponent, it doesn't wrap around to them, they have nothing to do, they exile my creature, and I'm out that card. No need to attack, I can stave off damage here. And again, I'm keeping the Liar in hand so that I can play it when they have a threat, and I can effectively keep that threat tapped for the duration. So this move here tells to me that my opponent does not have a playable card in hand, because otherwise they would have done it. If they have, they have 5 mana up, you would think that if they have a 5-drop or a 4-drop that they would play it. Instead, they're sacking, so they're looking. So my opponent's mindset is, oh crap, I got to find a card here, and I identify that they're trying to make their Blood Aspirant sort of big and to become a problem. I also identify that the Blood Aspirant can pay 2 and tap itself to deal a damage to one of my creatures they can't block, and I know he has these 2/1/1 token creatures right behind, here. So I sort of am identifying that I want to disrupt my opponent's strategy, because my opponent can't swing with anything on the ground. Yeah, the autopay didn't matter in this case, but sometimes you got to watch out for like how you want to tap your mana. So I'm thinking tap my opponent's creature down, and I could probably swing here. We'll see if I do or not. Yep. Because my opponent has suboptimal blocks. They can only block with the 1/3 on one of my creatures, so I'm getting in for higher damage. Now my opponent was at a higher life, yeah, but now the tables have turned. I've sort of, like I said, identified that my opponent is looking for answers, may or may not have gotten them, and I'm on the offensive at this point. So it's time to swing in. And what's interesting to note here is that in terms of who's gotten better cards, my opponent's seen more of the cards that he's chosen, right? So I have, it looks like here I have a lot more lands. I've gotten less cards that I want, but I've gotten the picks that I chose are doing more work for me than they are for my opponent. My opponent is playing out the cards that they have chosen, and I'm playing out the cards that I've chosen, and both of us have made like optimal choices. We were given the same set of cards to choose from. I've drafted for more value, and I'm playing my game. Here I decided to attack with 1 creature. That was actually a mistake. I thought, and this is totally just a mistake from me, I thought that this creature could not block. I thought in fact, it has to, it can only attack. It must attack each combat if able. So I could, when this card attacks, I could have blocked it with the War Leader. Instead, I swing, being mistaken, thinking I have an advantage, and he blocks it here. Total mistake. That's me realizing it, reading the card. I decided at this point to play the Typhon because I didn't want... Well, maybe I end up not, but I think I do. Because I didn't want any cards to be exiled from my graveyard, and so I want to take the opportunity when I can. That was my mindset. I don't know if that's correct or not. But I also think that if my opponent had removal, they would have used it by now. That's just I'm just reading. They would have taken out the War Leader so that they could swing in instead of playing the this guy, the 2-mana 3/1. So it looks sort of bad here. I mean, it looks like my opponent had 4 cards in hand to my 2, but I still feel like I have board control, so I've identified I'm the one with board presence, and my opponent, unsurprisingly, is playing like, just dinky, like 1 mana, like just not very impactful cards. Okay, opponent is trying to fish. So actually right there, I actually read it correctly. So that card exiles opponent's graveyard, which would be me, and playing that card and worrying about getting the Typhon out sooner than later as opposed to playing another one from my hand is sort of why I did that play, and it ended up being correct. My opponent couldn't play that card. It felt like they couldn't play that card because I didn't have any creatures that were power 2 or less. But my opponent probably could have played it anyway. Save that card as opposed to discarding it. And for some reason, my opponent's like making mistakes or something and totally like concedes. That surprised me when my opponent did that. So, all right, we'll go ahead and go with another game. I might have made 1 or 2 changes to the deck list. I know I ended up putting Gift of Strength in eventually, because I felt that a weakness of mine was against flying creatures, and Gift of Strength actually gives your creatures reach. I might have done that here and taken something else out. Look at all the 2-drops. Those seem pretty good. And I ended up taking out the Loathsome Chimera. I already have cards that do that, meaning big bodies, like stuff with 4 power or greater. And it's a 3-mana card, but I've got enough 3-drops and enough stuff that does what that card is intended to do. That's why I made that choice. Let's jump into the next game. Here, it's worth saying, like, another note I jotted down is just focus on your game and your actions. Like, it's sort of a waste of energy, and I see a lot of people doing it. Like, I go play Magic at FNMs or drafting with my friends and stuff, and it's like, everyone just complains about how someone always got, like, better cards, or I didn't get anything out of this pack, or I'm just, like, I always am constantly thinking in the back of my mind, dude, don't worry about it. Like, if you're playing, like, focus on your game. Play the best that you can. Identify where you went wrong, and just be a little objective about it. It makes you feel better because then it's not your fault, right? Your fault, your responsibility is to get better at the game we're playing. And that's why this is fun. Like, I don't want to go in and be upset or play draft during, like, I work all day, come home, play some drafts, and, like, get mad at it. Like, it's not good energy. So focus on your game, only on the actions that you can control. Okay, here I'm looking at this card and thinking about if I want to trade with it. And of course I do with my 2-drop versus their 2-drop. And I have to attack anyway, so I'm just sort of thinking about my plays. Looking at this now, I probably should have played Relentless Pursuit, gone fishing for a land, so that next turn I could find my forest off the top 4 cards of the deck and play the Typhon or the Maze Warden, the 4-drop. So that was a mistake on my part. Okay, found the forest, could not find a creature card, which is too bad. A little bit less than optimal value. But I do get 3 cards in the graveyard. So I'm thinking that the Underworld Rage Hound could come back. Here, just generally, it's good to think about, like, before you just lay down your land and not think and just kind of throw it on the field. Think, am I going to utilize all the mana this turn, or if I'm going to swing? Now I'm not going to do it on this board, but you know what? I could swing on this board because I could play something that has 4 power or greater. Okay, this card or this card. This would make my Stampeding Rider 3 power, and I could swing in, killing off one of his if he decided to block. So, I'm sort of reserving my judgment a little bit. Think about your plays before. And just like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, just think, am I going to play my 5-drop on curve, or am I going to suboptimally play, still get the land down, but play a little bit suboptimally because my opponent could be saving their removal. And so I'm definitely thinking about it. In the colors that my opponent's playing, in red and black, there are lots of removal cards. If I played my 5-drop, would they have a removal card to kill off my... And that would be better value for them. Like if they play that 2-drop enchantment that's like red and a mana, kill off my 3 toughness creature, and then play a 3-drop, I wouldn't look very good there. So maybe it's better that I play the Typhon, this 4-drop. I think the play here is to go with the War Leader. If I don't make it, I'll question that. This is a good part about having pre-recorded games. Like, I can almost like objectively play in my head right now what I should be doing with a little bit more time, and then we'll see if I actually ended up doing it or not. And that sort of makes me better inherently over the long run. So I probably should play the War Leader, but I don't know in this case. Because what's the advantage of playing the Forerunner? I guess Trample. I'm not sure. If my opponent has removal, they have removal. Okay, opponent has 4 cards in hand to my 3 cards in hand. But as my mana ramps up and we start trading off card for card, I noticed that my Typhon can give me more advantage as we go later into the game. So I don't mind playing the long game. I think just play anything here. I don't think it's necessarily better to like play the Typhon unless I could play both cards at the same time, that would be an advantage for me. Now, what I was thinking about is that if I play the Maze Warden, I would love if the Maze Warden next turn trades off with the card, the 3/3 with Death Touch. I thought I could play the Rage Hound. You can't. It doesn't work that way. Decide not to attack with the Forerunner because I can still get value of just the fact that it's on the field. It gives other creatures trample. And I know the War Leader, if I attacked, I don't want the War Leader to die to the Hierophant, the 3/3 with Death Touch. And my opponent's not really developing anything on board. Omen of the Forge, good card, just doesn't do very much in this scenario. And you'll see me understand that it isn't going to do much for me and still try to get value out of it anyway. You'll see what I mean. So I'm hoping he attacks with the 3/3. Great. I count up my mana because I know I can afford, based on my play, that I'm going to play the Typhon and the Forge and hold the War Leader. I can get 1 point of trample damage in. Or maybe I end up playing the War Leader. Yeah, that makes sense. Here I'm just doing a quick count to see what is my opponent trying to do. It seems like they're trying to load up their graveyard. So I'm thinking that they have a couple cards that are good in this set, that are kind of recursive, that put a body on the board and remove stuff from your opponent. Remove stuff from me. Like remove stuff and then also have a body. Here my opponent still doesn't have a board that beats mine, so I know I can swing in. And I have trample. But even if I didn't have trample, it'd be worth to see if they're going to trade. End up not doing it. And what I should do here is wait till as late as possible and then drop down the Omen of the Forge. Here, this seems like a desperation play. My opponent is looking for cards and they're not getting them. They've gone through so much of the deck and there's 14 cards in the graveyard, and yet they aren't finding anything worthwhile. So I'm sort of thinking, like, is my opponent just getting bad cards? Like, did they just choose bad cards? This is why I recommend newer players, if you have no idea what you're doing, me included, when it comes to drafting, use MTG Arena Tutor, which is the program. It's actually this program right here that you could see. If I clicked that in game, it would show my deck list and it would give me suggestions during the draft phase. Or Draftism. Wait, I messed it up again. Draftsim.com. The guy who runs that seems great and got a good little algorithm for doing all this stuff. So it takes out. So basically, there's no excuse. You should have utilized tools if you want to win. Choose the best cards. You won't get in situations like this where not much thought goes into this. I just have better cards than my opponent. There's some thought, like I want to play around stuff, but if my opponent had better cards on the field that could fight with my cards, my opponent has a fighting chance. Here, the reason I went with the Storm Herald is because I can get value out of it. I can put an enchantment on the field. I can get a big swing here while I have trample. And then at the end of it, I still have mana for to do the Forge and Scry 2. This is a bad block for my opponent because they have no other option. And they got a plan, so they know what to do about it. Here, I think I flubbed this. No, I don't. I considered trying to save my own Forerunner and put it on the bottom of the deck, and that wasn't a good call. Okay, at the end of this turn, looks like we're going to use the Forge, scry for 2, so I'm pretty confident that I'm going to draw something good, or at least set myself up for success. And even though my opponent has 3 cards in hand and looks like they have me out-advantaged, it definitely doesn't feel that way. Considered killing off his creature so that I can get my Typhon back, which might have been the right play there, actually. But I know if the Typhon dies, it goes to my graveyard, and then I can use it later on. So I wasn't too worried about it. And here, this is just a really bad play from my opponent, and that's why it's a bad card. Like, the red cards, there's always one in any set for drafting. You steal an opponent's creature. If there's no follow-up for it, it's not great. Like here, my opponent used an entire turn, an entire card, to steal my Typhon, deal 4 damage to my face, okay, and then sack my creature. So it's like removal, but takes a lot to set up, and oftentimes it's not worth it. Here I find gas on the top of the deck, and I think it's over at this point. I know I can do the hero of the games. I can play this a little slow. I don't need the removal right now. And also I know that if my opponent blocks, I still have like board advantage. So that's why I didn't draw my removal spell, because I don't need it. I want my opponent, I've got them on the back foot. Let's keep putting my position in in a position where they have to show me something that gets you out of the situation. Because if you don't, I'm still going to play the exact game that I've been playing until you don't. It's a bit like poker, right? It's like, I'm going to bet, and you better match my bet or raise me. If you raise me, are you bluffing, or do you have better cards than me? And I'm sort of looking at my opponent going, I bet the first round, they matched me. I bet the second round, they didn't match me. Or like, let's say for this example, they did match me, and then the third one, I kept doing the same bet, and they keep on matching, but we get to the end of the game, and it's like, here's my cards. I had something the entire time. Oh, I didn't have anything. I was just betting. Well, you've got to present that you have some sort of the win. I hope that analogy makes sense. If there's any poker players out there, it's about like putting forth, just playing to your outs. Like, I have the board advantage. I'm gonna keep on swinging. Like, do a big drop that kills off my creature. Like, you got to show me something before I alter my game plan. I think it's a good lesson for reading your opponent. I did a lot of that game 1 and game 2. Now, it's worth saying I do think I had better cards than both the last opponent and this opponent. But that's not a thing you can control. Sometimes you're going to be the person with better cards. Sometimes you're the person with worse cards. It matters how you play them, because that's the only thing that matters once we get into the game. Yeah, this is the one I flubbed. I thought I could Mystic Repeal on the stack, the Omen, so it goes away, so I would still have my creature up. It does not work that way. But I know I still have creatures in the graveyard, so my opponent pretty much has to, there's a likelihood that they just draw a land, or they just draw like something that doesn't help them. And if they draw a creature, I know I have Eroa's Blessing in my hand that can deal 4 damage to that creature. And then I swing for almost lethal. I think I leave them at 1. Because the Blessing gives you +1/+1. That's why removal's great. Just it's mostly about controlling the board, but then get that final piece of removal and solidify your win. I don't think I should play the mountain here. Okay, I end up doing it. Not sure why. I don't think I get any value out of it. Opponent just plays their land, and I know I have the game to win. Okay, well, that's it for this video. Yeah, I swing here. We'll play it out. Nothing weird happened. All right, awesome. Opponent's still playing. Whatever. Okay. But anyway, yeah, I guess determine what kind of deck that you have. If you're an aggro, a mid-range, or a control deck. If you're a control deck, you want to pretty much leave your mana up, control what your opponent's doing, play for value. Mid-range, you've got to identify if you're the aggro mid-range player or if you're the value mid-range player. And there's two different archetypes, right? Like, you, in most cases, you're going to be playing for value and then outvaluing your opponent. But sometimes you just want to aggro in. Like, sometimes if you have evasive creatures, like flyers or stuff that gets around, like unblockables, you're the mid-range deck that just is trying to plink in for 20 damage and then call it done, right? And then aggro. And I think aggro and control are the easier deck types to play. Mid-range is what your deck, what limited decks mostly become is a mid-range, because you're playing lots of creatures and killing off opponents' creatures and playing the board. And that's what mid-range sort of specializes in. So in some ways, mid-range is more difficult to play because you have to do that dance of, am I the aggressor or am I on defense right now? So the next note is limited is about card advantage. It's also about tempo. You saw some examples of that today, and I'm going to go into way more. Keep on watching this channel because I'm going to talk about card advantage and tempo, and it's really hard. I mean, it's easy to say that, like, oh, focus on if you have one card, make sure it costs the opponent 2 cards, right? It's easy to say. I didn't learn that for years. Like, what does that actually mean? Like, yeah, I can get a 2-for-1. That sounds good. I want to see it in gameplay with reading your opponent and, like, this is how you get a 2-for-1. And so examples from the game is the best way to do that, especially with tempo too, because tempo is such a hard concept to try to explain to someone who doesn't know a lot about card games, or even people that play lots of card games. They don't think about, they just don't think in terms of tempo. Constructed players sometimes do, but anyway, focus on your game and your actions. The only thing you can control, right? And then read your opponent. So, all right, thanks guys. See you in the next video.